Hey and hello, my name is Geno Samuel and welcome back finally to the next installment of Discographies, yes, where I go through in detail the making of and sound of every album by prog rock band, yes, and say what I think about it. I'm back. I'm finally back. It's been a while. Anyway, where were we last time? So the 2009 touring lineup that I saw with my dad, featuring Oliver Wakeman on keys and former Yes tribute band singer Benoit David, got to work on making a new album, their first original studio album since Magnification, released in 2001, 10 years prior. Kinda like my previous Discographies Yes video, actually. Anyway, Steve Howe, Chris Squire, and Oliver got to work on new songs from some ideas they had in Phoenix, Arizona in March 2010. The original idea was that Howe and Wakeman produced the album, with Wakeman acting as engineer as well. Though after some time, Oliver suggested that they also bring in renowned producer Trevor Horn, who was, of course, originally the bassist and lead singer for the short-lived but very successful synth duo project The Buggles with Jeff Downes, and original John Anderson replacement vocalist who sang lead vocals for the band's 1980 Drama album. He helped produce the band's 1983 and 87 albums, and didn't have contact with the band since that time, really. So this was kind of an exciting reunion. They had an idea that they would properly record the song We Can Fly From Here, which the 1980 lineup originally rehearsed and planned to have on the new album, but it didn't work out at the time. They did, however, perform it live during the tour supporting the Drama album. The Buggles then took that song and recorded it for their second album, Adventures in Modern Recording, and extended it into a two-part synth prog epic, but it didn't make it into the album once again. So Trevor came back to produce some of the songs, I guess, and he recorded a guide vocal for the new two-parter Fly From Here, so that apparently Benoit could sing it exactly as Horn, but, I mean, why? I know vocally David sounds more like Horn than Anderson, but he's neither an Anderson nor a Horn copycat. Like, let him sing it like Benoit David, come on. Apparently, Trevor had trouble getting Benoit to sing it the way he wanted him to due to his French-Canadian accent, which I find is a totally ridiculous comment to make considering that Englishman Trevor Horn has weird pronunciations when singing as well. Anyway, after about 6 weeks of recording with Trevor Horn overseeing 2 of them, the band went on a break to resume work on the album in the new year, 2011. The band was also considering turning Fly From Here into a long-form epic prog piece, which Oliver was against since they had already recorded a lot of good material. They decided to include the second part of the Buggles' unreleased Fly From Here as well as part of their suite, which was called Sad Night at the Airfield, and an unreleased third part called Madman at the Screens. Squire and Howe co-wrote a fourth part called Bumpy Ride, and then the suite was pretty much complete. They started work on a song based on yet another unreleased track from the Buggles called Riding a Tide, which was also recorded for the second Buggles album, but it didn't make the cut, most likely because a lot of their new material at the time was heavily influenced by their time with Yes, and didn't really sound like the Buggles. The band decided to hire Horn as the producer for the album since that made more sense since he co-wrote most of it anyway, and Oliver Wakeman was due to return to the studio in early 2011, only to find out that the band had been working with Buggles and Asia keyboardist and one album Yes keyboardist Jeff Downes behind his back, and they reasoned since he played on the original demos for most of these songs, he would have a better feel for the music, so they kicked out Wakeman Jr., who I imagine was very bitter about the whole ordeal. So now this was almost like a return of the Drama lineup of the band. Wakeman took 4 tracks that he co-wrote and recorded with the band with him, and released them finally to the world in 2019 as a mini-album called From a Page. I'm not going to give a detailed review of it since I haven't gotten it yet. I really want to get it because there's only one song of it available online as far as I can see, and that's the single version of To The Moment, which sounds freaking amazing, and I really recommend you to check it out on YouTube and buy the album for yourself. I know I will. So getting back to the Fly From Here album of 2011, the album artwork marked a return of Roger Dean, and it's a painting that he started in the 1970s but didn't complete it until he got commissioned for the album. And Fly From Here was released in 2011, 10 years after the previous album. So how did it sound, and does it compare with Drama? And how does Benoit fill the shoes of past singer John Anderson? Well, the album opens with the Fly From Here Overture, a short instrumental track opening with echoey piano chords playing a motif in 5/4 time. The rhythm firmly establishes itself as pretty fast-paced as the echo dies away, and then we get a chord strike from a very overdriven guitar, crash of cymbals, and intro of strings and bass. The motif that goes bum 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 repeats again with no reverb now, and with synth strings doubling the piano. I feel like Trevor is trying to do the echo, no echo, the reverb, no reverb trickery of 90125. I mean, I get it, but I can't get behind it the same way, since I feel that the instruments sound very dead and sterile in this digital recording environment. It's not my favorite engineering moment, personally. When the drums kick in, it's awesome because Alan White brings in his trademark polyrhythm as the band keeps going in 5/4, but he's playing in 4/4. And as these things go on, after 5 bars, they both link back up again, with Alan White playing the first beat of his part, and then the band playing the first beat of their part. Super cool. Squire's bass is wonderfully chuggy too. There's a bit of call and response between piano and strings. Still, it's all instrumental here, as new dark and heavy themes are introduced. And by God, the drum echo fills in the back are my favorite, like... The mysterious tone is further accentuated with an introduction of light in the back. Some light noodling from Steve as well. And then the song settles into an unresolved held chord, which dissolves into the first track really, is Fly From Here, Part 1, We Can Fly. 30 years in the making, this track finally gets a proper release. It opens with nightbird sounds, some synth whistling, and then eventually a return of the piano. The opening vocals are awesome, atmospheric, and the accent on Benoit does sound more like Trevor than John, actually. Along the edge of this airfield, the old prop drive their line of stand. Altimeters reading 0. Formless memories lingering. Swelling in bass notes in the back, no rhythm keeping yet, just pads holding the chords. The next verse has a more intense arrangement, mute pick guitar playing a simple pattern, bass and drums play in 6/8 when everyone else is still in 4s. And the mix is great, by the way. In the next verse, Benoit's vocals are doubled with Chris, and they blend wonderfully together. Sounds like one unit, really. Soft pads still are holding chords in the back, because Downs isn't a very virtuosic player, he's more about chords, but hey, it's the way that he plays the chords. When the chorus comes in with the titular line, and we can fly from here, and we can fly from here, the chorus takes on a halftime feel at first, and then switches back to the normal feel beat halfway through. After the chorus, we get a little instrumental section featuring some percussion in the back, bongos, shakers, and tambourines, which may have been performed by Benoit David, because he played that percussion live as well. Steve Howe first slightly plays together with the synth chords, but then starts getting more adventurous, and we get a little noodly solo, and it's all right. The next verse actually brings out Chris Squire on lead vocals, with David hanging in the back to harmonize. I guess this adds a little bit more legitimacy to have the other members come to the forefront in John's absence. There's a dramatic build-up to the final chorus, with lingering vocals singing repeatedly, lingering, lingering, as instruments and pads build up to the final run of And We Can Fly From Here. There's more varied lyrics in this chorus, along with added backing vocals singing, can fly, can fly, can fly. And with the close of the chorus, we get a rather yesy instrumental transition with a triplet fill with hits and descending notes. Dun, 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 dun. And this leads into the outro section, which is based on the previous instrumental section after the first chorus, with, of course, more guitar noodling and lovely harmonies singing, every day that you waste is one more that you lost. Squire does his trademark bassline thing of ascending note by note over the course of the repeating phrase, and a 6/8 feel of chord strikes finish the song unresolved. I love how, like in classic Yes fashion, they repeat rhythm and melodic ideas throughout the track, but change them up so much that you don't really realize that they're recurring. Like in the early verse, you have a bass and kick drum playing doo-doo, 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 and then at the end you have keys playing doo-doo, 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 doo-doo. I know it sounds pretty much the same if I do it, but if it's the full band, it sounds a lot different. Honestly, when I was listening to the album again for this review was when I first registered the connection. Anyway, great track, and really pleased with the return of this Yes so far. Final held chord bleeds into the next part, Fly From Here, Part 2, Sad Night at the Airfield, which is based on Part 2 of the unreleased Buggles We Can Fly From Here. And after listening to the original from the early 80s, I'm kind of astounded as to just how near identical this arrangement is on the Yes album. Of course, there's different instrumentation, but the feel, structure, motifs, lyrics, melody are untouched pretty much. Anyway, a soft acoustic guitar playing a pattern over some indistinct air traffic control chatter sound effects in the back. After a cycle of these chords, a shaker and a melody line played on another acoustic guitar track come in, and this is the melody of the future verses. Very super soft pads hold the chord, adds a nice dreamy 80s flair to the whole thing, and Benoit's voice feels very close and intimate. Lovely melody. There are no ground staff in the empty corridors. Is no one sleeping? No one awake? I'd start an engine in the night if only just to break the silence. That last intake. The instrumentals of this verse are very subdued, but the chorus is just a blast of instrumentals, full on, no transition, very epic. The lead-in in the vocals is the line, that last intake of air. And the of sounds very weird, like autotune gone haywire, like of air. And of course everyone's on autotune on this album, it's just the way it is nowadays. Anyway, the chorus is great though. The mix sounds a bit crowded because of the epic chords which drown out the drums a bit. I want to hear them pop a bit more. The bass line is very slow, consisting of long, sustained notes, and focusing on just a single strike at the start of a new chord. There's a piano track playing a repeating pattern in the mix, which is a motif that is reinterpreted at several points on this track. The sustained synth chords remind me a little bit of Pink Floyd actually, and if I was to pin down the mood of this track to a specific Floyd song, it would be Sorrow off the Momentary Lapse of Reason album. Anyway, the bass line is very low, perhaps Squire's playing on a 5-string bass here. The verse gives the music some room to breathe as the epicness takes a break. The epicness returns with the next chorus, of course, and at the end of it, we get a not great but okay falling panning guitars triplets parts going like I mean, most of the things that Steve Howe does sound very detached from the rest of the music, and it doesn't, to me at least, sound like, oh, a guitar solo, or oh, a guitar pattern, but rather, oh, it's a Steve Howe moment. Sometimes he's fine, of course, and pretty good even. Chords, riffs, yeah, great. But when he gets more freedom is where things get a little iffy. Anyway, an organ and pads welcome a brief bass interlude. Very soft melody following that piano run that I mentioned earlier. Sounds lovely, full of chorus and very warm. The next verse is more subdued, and lots of cool rhythm percussion in the back, as Benoit sings, all the ground staff in the empty corridors, they're all strangers who never cared. Another little bass solo part leads into an instrumental version of the chorus, prominently featuring a slide guitar solo, which is pretty cool actually. And this is the mood that loops around and around until the song closes. Benoit belts out occasional, turn yourself around, and backing vocals answer, turn yourself around. The intensity continues to build, the guitar continues to slide around, and doesn't offend me honestly. In fact, I enjoy it. And at the end of the penultimate cycle of the phrase, the vocals ascend so high with the line, I watch the sky, I watch the sky. The I is sustained for so long as the guitar screams ever higher. This really is one of the best tracks from Yes in a long while, and ends with a lovely undetermined ending with a fade-in of mellotron string chords. And these introduced the next part, Fly From Here Part 3, Madman at the Screens, which is basically the overture that we heard at the start of the album, but with lyrics attached now. This is based around the third part of the Buggles' Fly From Here suite from the early 1980s, which was never released to the public, unlike parts 1 and 2, which were made available eventually as bonus tracks on a remastered re-release of their second album in 2010. Anyway, arrangement-wise, it's almost identical to the overture. The piano intro now has vocals that follow closely to the piano motif, and Benoit sounds very moist here. He's salivating profusely, like Karen Carpenter often sounded on the Carpenters records. I'll try to recreate it as best and as gross as I can. It's like, take a table in the evening by the waterside. Distorted guitars and heavy bass come in, just like in the first track, and as the full band comes in, more reverb and echo are placed on the vocals, which is a nice touch. We get a call and answer again, just like before, except now with added vocals. Benoit says, out on the shoreline, and Squires says, shoreline! His voice sounds so powerful here, full of grit and character. The music is quite frantic in these moments, and I feel that the vocal melody is a little low in range, and as a consequence, it doesn't come off as intense as the instrumentals surrounding it. Just a little thing. In the following Sailor, Sailor Beware section, there are dense harmonies, and it sounds like horn is in there somewhere too. It's possible. The next verse and chorus follow much in the same way, and I especially like the synth mount percussion during the call and response, like and after the second chorus, the arrangement gets more sparse, little to no percussion, 4 on the floor kick pattern, and occasional echoey tom fills. Very long chords. At these moments, it's easier to appreciate just how dense the arrangements are, like 5 keyboard sounds stacked on top of each other at the same time. The guitar, even though quite heavy, is not overbearing. It's got very subdued distortion, which is an interesting technique. In the outro, they go back into the melody and arrangement of the verses, and echoey vocal passages are cut up by some light organ solos and guitar lines. And at the end, bass rises up to play the melody line, with everyone else climaxing and concluding. But when you think it's all finished, the piano comes in, playing nice chords in a variation of the post-chorus melody. Dun, 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 dun. Low harmonized vocals chime in. Dreaming, seeing you there. And then, just like the tracks before it, the final chord dissolves into the next part. Fly From Here Part 4, Bumpy Ride, a largely instrumental piece, which is quite goofy sounding. It fades in rather than beginning outright, with everyone playing in unison. There's some overdubs of guitar lines glistening down like, ew! And overall this track sounds off-puttingly happy given what just came before it. And at some points, they do a sequence where they play through all 12 major chords counting in threes, reminiscent of a similar scene in Awaken from Going for the One. And there's an auto-wah effect applied on one guitar track which only accentuates the goofiness. It's like... Then halfway through, there's a recap section which is an atmospheric, dreamy recreation of that part in part 3 where they go, dreaming, seeing you there. So that's a nice way to connect back to previous tracks in an attempt to add legitimacy to this suite of little related songs. Then after that, it speeds up quite a bit as the music returns to the original bouncy theme. And then they finish with the ascending cycling of major chords going ever upwards, phasing through space as a phaser effect washes over the entire music, which leads right into part 5, We Can Fly, Reprise. This is one of the few tracks that have retained some of Oliver Wakeman's original keyboard parts. This track is pretty much just the chorus of We Can Fly, starting off with some fanfare like noodles from Wakeman. And after a couple of phrases, we get into the chorus. It carries on much like in part 1. And we can fly from here into the sky that's clearing. Look back, we'll dry the tears for those once held so dearly. The backing vocals sound really good, despite being rather auto-tuney. And at the finish of the chorus, we get into an old familiar instrumental theme from part 1, from We Can Fly, featuring a lead guitar part, and then it quickly concludes with a 6/8 pattern like in part 1. And then the last chord strike is suspended, and it fades out naturally with some pilot air traffic control chatter sounds, which personally sound more like astronauts to me. And that's the end of the Fly From Here suite. People have been saying things like, wow, 24 minutes? This is their largest track ever, longer than even Gates of Delirium. It's a reach to think like that, honestly, because the suite is very distinctly 5 separate tracks, 6 if you include the overture as well. The first 3, anyway, can distinctly work as standalone songs, so this isn't like Gates or Close to the Edge, which were single, lengthy compositions. But for what it is, it's pretty good. But I must say that Bumpy Ride is the weakest part in here, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this is the only theme that was freshly created for this album. The rest of the songs in here were developed from demos made in the early 1980s, and they retain that refined vintage touch of sophistication and fresh songwriting, which Bumpy Ride lacks. Anyway, but overall, it's a pretty solid effort. I'm really happy with it, overall. So let's move on to the next track. The Man You Always Wanted Me to Be. It's a gentle number with a steady bass line focusing on just one note, and big surprise, it's got Chris Squire on lead vocals. And he sounds great, mind you greatly assisted by autotune, but it's alright. It's his tone, man. The autotune can't make your tone of voice sound good. And Chris has got that. This one has a kind of rock country love song feel and features some interesting beat skips, and without those it would feel like any other band could play it pretty easily. Though these beat skips aren't random for the sake of prog, I feel this is a compositional trait that I've also noticed in Freddie Mercury's songwriting, in that he didn't write words to fit the music, he wrote music to fit the words. And you sometimes got unusual changes in music because that particular line or lyric was longer or shorter than what you would expect. And this happens in this song too. So the music follows the flow of the lyrics very naturally, and it doesn't feel like they wrote words just to fill that space in the music. The verses stay pretty much on a very suspenseful single chord, which changes at the end of the verse with a sustained harmonized you. And a lovely guitar line leads into the chorus, which initially sounded like a link that would link to the chorus, but it's not. It's actually the chorus, and it's full of rich harmonies. Acoustic guitar and piano keep the chords moving in the back, as Squire concludes the chorus with the titular, "The man you always wanted me to be." This track has a much more raw feel, less processing going on, less effects, and as a result, feels more personal. In the second verse, Steve adds truly nice touches on electric guitar to fill the space in between the lyrics, like do things in a very different way. Don't know what to do. I have changed my point of view. No longer lost. Organ chords also come into the mix here, in addition to a tambourine rhythm and return of bongos. Lovely touch. The chorus follows much in the same vein as before, with a bit more rich instrumentation, including more guitar fills. This is followed by the outro, which is where musically it really feels like they reached that point that they've been hinting at throughout the entire song so far. It's the root chord, really. You know what the root chord should be, judging from the chord progressions and the melody movements, but it doesn't really touch on that point until the outro section, which consists of 2 alternating chords going all the way until the end of the song. And this is the point where Chris really became the man I always wanted him to be. We get some super funky, albeit cheesy, coming in at several points during this section. And the bass takes on a cool pattern, not playing a true bass line anymore, but rather a looping riff. There's enough chord keeping in the instrumentation so that playing root notes for the chords is not necessary for Chris, so Squire can just funk it up really. There's some intertwined brief guitar solos that go in between the and lines of "the man you always wanted me to be." The mood of this track reminds me of Wondrous Stories, actually. It doesn't need to be too complicated to be a great song. And the way it ends too is really cool, with one more sustained chord and little fills on bongos slowing down until the very end. What a wonderfully composed track. I love it. Damn, this album sounds really good so far. Anyway, this is followed by Life on a Film Set, which is yet another song that was recorded for the second Buggles album but didn't make it into the cut because it sounded too much like Yes. When I heard the original version, it was astounding again just how identical it was to the cut that made it into the Fly From Here album. Apart from, of course, in the original it's a synth bass, here it's a real bass, and as opposed to a drum machine, it's a real drum kit playing the beat here. But honestly, the arrangement is exactly the same. It opens with broken chords played on acoustic guitar. Benoit shows up to deliver reverb-rich vocals, and he sounds great. All the poems of my neighbors, they drift upon the sand. Are there still tendrils of a vast but gentle plant which they command? It's a melancholic tone establishing the song. It continues to be quite quiet in the second half of the opening verse as well. Plus we get mellotron-like flutes playing chords, filling up a little bit of this sparse accompaniment. And then we get a sudden build-up featuring electric guitars and some synths too. You're riding a tiger, do-do-dee-doo, boom, do-do-dee-doo. For the next verse, the beat comes in really. Rich synth strings surround the vocals, and there's lots of processing in the drums and toms, making them thunderous to accentuate the lyrics. Squire accompanies David in harmony throughout the verse. Then we go back into that pretty brief riding a tiger chorus, you might say, except now the harmonies are very dense, and at the last repeat of this line, everyone holds Tiger! Super long. And this leads into a significant switch-up of the music, fast strumming on double-tracked acoustic guitars. There's lots of time signature changes which make this second part very difficult to dance to. A motif on keys reminiscent of a Wakeman piece show up too. Though this isn't Wakeman, as in fact it's a part that has been lifted right off that early version recorded by the Buggles nearly 30 years prior. The melody is bouncy as well, made all the more bouncy by the echo effect. We were all the silence, all the same. And this goes on for a while, adding on instrumentation like brief guitar solo melodies as well, and an active drum beat. And then we go back into the riding a tiger line, but now it's very different. It's accentuated by heavy tribal-like toms and a single deep chord throughout. The line is made all the more intense with everyone available, singing in huge multi-track harmony. Riding a tiger, Right after that, the band go back into the previous bouncy rhythm accompanied by the most aimless guitar embellishment, which goes on to the end, unfortunately, like Steve Howe doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Boom, ba-ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-bum, Near the finish line, Riding a Tiger comes back with even more added chords on synths, synth ahs, climbing that musical mountain. And at the last moment, the instrumentals stop and we get one last Riding a Tiger! And it sounds so tightly compressed and intense, it goes into your ears, through your brain, and into your heart. Like, it's such a great engineering and mixing job, it makes me jump out of my seat a little bit. Really awesome. Nice, solid song, composition and mixing wise. Next up is Hour of Need, which is apparently based on a Steve Howe song released on his 2005 solo album. And I listened to that one, and it's an instrumental track with mostly a slide guitar playing the melody, and it sounds nothing like this one. So I'm not sure about that comment. From the very beginning until the very end, Steve plays his trusty Mexican bajalia, either rhythm and chords, or rhythm or chords, or occasional filler solos. The song is rather easygoing and gentle, and features doubled lead vocals with Steve Howe and Benoit singing in unison. In the dark, while the abyss isn't clear, can believe desperately will the The lyrics are quite cheesy, like "Can't we all just get along? Let's make the world a better place" sort of deal. But musically, it's very solid. Again, a cross-stick snare pattern plays throughout, which only adds to the gentleness. And the chorus features nice harmony vocals as well, but nothing too extravagant. The most extravagant thing about this number is the leftover Oliver Wakeman Minimoog solo for like 4 bars, where he goes like, The second chorus at the beginning features a little simple Spanish balalaika solo, harkening back to the likes of All Good People perhaps. And the outro section features the chord motif that opened the song, so it's in classic Yes fashion, bringing the composition back full circle. It's a very tasteful arrangement, introducing some light percussion in the back towards the end, though nothing too wild or exotic. Chris hangs back as well, plays very lightly, and I'm pretty sure he's playing a fretless bass in this one. Hour of Need has a country-esque feel, and personally it's my favorite style for Steve Howe. He really missed his calling as a country and bluegrass guitarist, because I legitimately think he sounds great when he's in this musical mood. It's quite short, like 3.5 minutes, and really, really nice. Howe is a really poor singer because he just doesn't have a voice, but it works really well here because Benoit is singing with him throughout the song, and between David's high voice and Howe's low mumble, their harmony is like at a distance of 2 octaves. Worked out well though. Next up is Solitaire, another Howe-led piece. This is an acoustic guitar solo piece, and Mood for a Day, it is not. Clap, it is not. It starts off somber with a simple ominous motif going do 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 do. Then suddenly it goes into a nice bouncy section that reminds me of a slowed down clap, in that classic Chet Atkins style of playing bassline, chords, and melody all at once. It's quite impressive, honestly. It doesn't follow from the intro well at all, though. Completely throws me off from what I expected. And this nice section just suddenly ends and transitions into a Spanish-like melody in 2-part harmony. It's nice, but just wasn't expecting it either. Then that ends, tempo switches up yet again, and we get another brand new happy bouncy melody. All of these sound pretty nice, but they just don't connect with each other at all. After a while, we go back into the vaguely Mediterranean theme again, and this is my favorite part actually, where Steve goes do 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 which is immediately followed by my least favorite section, like something from a bad children's song. Then we go back into a variation of the first significant section of the piece, and then concludes with the opening notes again. And looking back, I realized that this motif was reused a couple of times during the track, but again, this is one of the compositional traits of Yes that is so amazing, is that they can incorporate these themes, ideas into their songs in so many ways that you don't even notice at first that these are repeating ideas because they're all switched around so much. But yeah, overall, not a fan of this one, because even though some of the melodic ideas are lovely, there's just too many of them, and they are played one after the next without much reason. It feels like Howe had lots of ideas for tracks, but didn't develop any of them into full tracks, so he just stuck them all together here. Ugh. Anyway, we then get into the closing track, Into the Storm, which originated from a jam session with the whole band and is the sole track that has a Benoit David songwriting credit. It's full of happy energy from the beginning, heavily focused on major 7th arpeggios. And there's cowbell at the beginning as well, so that's like an immediate 7 out of 10 right there. Chris Squire uses the wah effect on his bass throughout, and he hasn't sounded this much like a duck since Tornado. You got a nice range of instrumentation. You got electric guitars, of course, and also acoustic guitar strumming along with the chords all the way through the track, kinda using the acoustic guitar in a more rock song setting like they did back in Roundabout. And there's also okay guitar noodling. Nice big harmonies in the vocals from the full band throughout, really. Everyone is here, maybe even Trevor as well. This track sounds distinctly more modern than other tracks, and there's a movement in threes in the chorus which adds to the modernity, like and this beat kind of reminds me of something that U2 would do. The square synth arpeggio playing is super cool, and you hear this at several points throughout the song. The second verse and chorus don't add too much difference, which is perfectly fine. It's an enjoyable groove. Then after the second chorus, we finally get a little proggy with a beat switch up into 7/8 time, and then Benoit leaps into the foreground, just solo without any harmony, and sounds lovely. Armies of angels are starting to fall. Lots of reverb here, and honestly, I kind of forgot about him since it's been a while since we heard him singing solo. And there's also synth, Owner of a Lonely Heart like orchestra strikes, punctuating each new bar. Musically, the song builds up with Benoit belting out, "Take me away." It's great. It sounds like a very young band. And then that new motif cuts out. And then Alan White, in the back, counts the band back in with a 4. And then we go back into the regular verse and chorus, and then back into the 7/8 Armies of Angels thing. Getting really epic here, when all of a sudden the track changes to a 6/8 section with a guitar solo noodling away until the very end. Lovely big chords, sounds nice and profound, and it's shaping up to be a very lovely conclusion to the album. Towards the end, in the back, Benoit shows up to sing, "And we can fly from here," bringing the album back full circle, if you will, in a haunting way, honestly. Such a gratifying ending. And the song ends with a cheekily acoustic flourish from Steve after all the instrumentals have cut out, like pretty sure that wasn't intended to be on the track, but it sounded kind of cool, so they left it in. And it makes you realize that this isn't just a piece of sentient music, but rather a group of musicians in a studio. So this is the first Yes album in 10 years, and the second effort with a non-Anderson singer. Benoit carried his weight wonderfully on the record. The mixing and engineering, I think, come off really great in the second half, as there are some choices made that I don't necessarily agree with in the earlier tracks, namely the dry parts sounding a bit lifeless. But the songs are largely really good, and a lot of it, I must say, is because they are recycled tracks from a long time ago. Shame that they didn't use any of Wakeman's compositions, because from what I've heard, they sounded really interesting and more modern. But I'm happy with what we got here. So I'm gonna give Fly From Here, from Yes, a 7.9 out of 10. Definitely my favorite Buggles album. As I mentioned in the beginning, the album was released in June 2011, and I picked it up from the record store myself. Hold on, let me get it. And I got the fancy copy with a bonus booklet and a DVD. This lovely thing right here. Look at that. Oh, Roger Dean. Oh yes. Oh yeah, baby. This looks really great. I love it. So yeah, this is the discs. It's quite rare apparently now, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. Boop, boop. Awesome. I love it. It performed really well in the charts, reaching the top 30 in the UK charts, the first chart-topping album from the band in quite a while, and was fairly well received by the critics too. But John Anderson listened to it, obviously, and he wasn't too fond of it. He thought it was sounding too old-fashioned. It's been a while since I've read that interview, but I believe he said something along the lines of, "I love Trevor, but guys, what the hell are you doing?" Anyway, of course the band went on a huge tour to promote the album, and Jesus Christ, they fucking sucked. And there's several reasons for that, I think. Firstly, the band aren't as young as they used to be, and you could already see this from the In the Present tour a few years before this, when they had to slow down the song so much because they simply can't move as quickly as they used to. Like for example, Tempest Fugit Live is now like a minute longer just because they had to play it like do 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 bum 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 bum. And this mostly comes from Alan White, who's had some health problems recently and operations as well, and of course Steve Howe. It's not a criticism of the people per se, but rather is just the harsh reality of getting old. You just lose, your motor function abilities, and it's especially evident with musicians who originally played very fast-paced music and parts like Yes, but it still depends on the people too, cause PFM, the Italian proggers, are about the same age as Yes, but they play amazing still. They also retained 3 original members until a few years ago when it went down to 2, but they still have their lead singer/drummer, who looks kind of senile, not gonna lie, but he's such an energetic stage presence and still plays drums like it's nobody's business. Secondly, Jeff Downes is not part of the Wakeman family, nor is he a K, nor is he a Koroshev, nor is he's just flat out the worst keyboard player in the band's history. And it's not just his age. You could see just how poorly he performs in his 80s shows with Asia. He can't keep up with the band, or he's too fast, and he's never in time, honestly. And when it comes down to playing such complex music like Yes songs, you gotta keep in time, man. And switching between keyboards all over the place is quite a challenging thing to do. And I remember watching a fan cam recording on YouTube from that tour when they were playing Heart of the Sunrise, and it just did not sound tight to begin with. But then they were getting to that instrumental in the middle where they were like boom, dun, 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 boom, ba-dum, boom, dun, 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 dun. And the camera was focusing on Hal, who was playing his part fine, and was just looking at Downes like, dude, what the hell are you doing? And then was the big switch where the band cut out, and Wakeman on the original record played this little piano bit. But Downes royally screwed it up. I don't know what the hell he did, because the camera wasn't on him, but it sounded like... And the look on Steve's face was just like, dear God, he must have been so embarrassed. I've seen Steve Howe get angry, and it's not a pleasant experience. Of course, polite applause followed at the conclusion of that song, but boy, it wasn't comfortable. I'm pretty sure I left a comment on that video saying something like, I'm 16 years old and I can play keys better than Jeff. I wish I could find that video though. Thirdly, as good as Benoit David was with his Yes tribute band, with his band Mystery, and even on the Yes record, Yes are a big band that go on big tours, and you have to be prepared to sing a lot, and if you're not ready for it, it's gonna take a toll on your voice. And Benoit was not great with extensive touring. His singing was strained, and he was in a lot of trouble. And you combine all those weak points together, the band knows this of course, and if you feel like you're just not as strong as you could be, your morale is going to be low, and you will end up performing not up to your usual standards. So it was not going well for the band, and things only got worse in February 2012 when David contracted a so-called respiratory illness, I think it was pneumonia. And you know what the band did? If you said kicked him out, you'd be right. Yes, indeed, yes. This is the second time in the band's history that a lead singer was kicked out of the band for contracting a serious respiratory illness. And John Anderson offered to come back because he was feeling better and he was willing, but oh no, for some reason the band rejected him and instead went with yet another former singer for a Yes tribute band and 2-album singer for the prog rock band Glass Hammer, John Davison. Yeah, you heard me right. A guy that sounds and looks like John Anderson circa 1975, with his first name also being spelled Jon and his surname ending with Son. So he was recommended to Chris Squire by their mutual friend Taylor Hawkins, who is the drummer of the rock band Foo Fighters. So that's cool. So John number 2 came aboard and finished the tour, and is still the lead singer to this day. And this really sucked for Benoit, I imagine, because of course his illness was temporary, and there was really no real reason to be so harsh to him. But later, David said that he understood the band's decision because, frankly, they were getting ahead in years, and maybe didn't have much time left. So they couldn't just wait for him to get better. That's an honorable stance, and I wouldn't expect anything less from a Canadian. So jumping ahead to 2016, Yes pitched an idea to Trevor Horn to re-record Fly From Here with his own vocals, truly finally bringing back the whole drama lineup. Horn wanted to do it, and it was basically him and Steve Howe that were involved with the process of not only erasing Benoit's contributions from the album, but also remixing it a little bit, adding and removing some bits too. And the result is Fly From Here Return Trip, released in March 2018. It had a limited physical distribution and was seemingly to serve as a little bonus album, like What If Fly From Here was made by the drama lineup. So there are some differences, and of course I'm not going to go through it in as much detail because it's basically the same songs, but I will talk about what's different. First off, Horn's voice. To my knowledge, he hasn't been a lead singer since the early 1980s and was out of practice. And when he sings his parts, it sounds like he's struggling a lot of the time. In addition, he's way too loud in the mix, making it sound like all the more like he's been tacked on rather than being part of the song originally. And this is very evident in part 1, We Can Fly. There's also new added reverb and compression on Chris Squire's lead vocals here as well, and it doesn't sound great. It's like plate reverb, and it kind of goes on throughout the entire album. They did something to it with the intention of, I guess, making it pop more. So there's more boosting to the music, more limiting, to get the songs touch that sonic plateau throughout, and it sounds inferior to the original, I'd say. Then, the ending vocals of We Can Fly were changed around a bit, less of the lead vocal lines to give the backing "We can fly, more prominence. And then the coda and the guitar solo from the original release were replaced with the most god-awful studio editing I've ever heard from a major album release. This is YouTube poop level of bad, legit. So they took that instrumental run of 2 bars like do 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 do, and then repeated it one more time, and then repeated it again, except they took that entire track, and I can fucking do this on my freaking Acid Pro 7 DAW, take that section and press the plus key on my keyboards 12 times, because that's all they did. They pitched up that section a full octave artificially, and right after, they repeated again, except they pitched the whole thing down an octave. So here's my recreation of the ending of the new We Can Fly. Doody 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 doody. Yeah, it doesn't sound good. I know, and on the record, it sounds just as not good. Was there a Mimi engineer intern that snuck that in when no one was looking? Like, I can't believe that Horn would be okay with something like this. Maybe he's getting old and losing his sense of sensible judgment, I don't know. In addition, with that last repeat, we get a bleepy sonar effect like in Pink Floyd's Echoes, which bleeps like 10 times, and this bleeds into the next track, Sad Night at the Airfield. And doesn't even fade out or anything, it just kind of stops. It's a pretty sloppy transition. The intro guitar has some weird extreme panning, which I don't remember from the original release, and the shaker is too loud. The instrumentals sound completely different as well. I think this is one of the overdubs that Howe re-recorded. In addition, lots of the keyboards on this track are completely different, and I think they're played by horn, not downs. With the first chorus, there's no drums coming in, so it's a completely different mood, personally not as epic. Also, in the sections where there's a little break in the singing, like of air, dun, 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 dun. Too late, like that in the original, and they just shortened those breaks and removed 1 or 2 beats to make it feel more proggy or something. So it was like regular 4/4 for most of it, and then suddenly there's a 2/4 here and there. So it's like too late. Like, why? It ruins the vibe. And the acoustic guitar solo fill right after the chorus was newly recorded. It's fine, but I prefer the original. The drum beat in verse 2 also sounds new, but it's not actually. Personally, it sounds better on this version because they just remixed it and made it more prominent. It sounds really cool. The bass is also a lot louder, but I think it's too loud. So get a plus, get a minus. There's some new backing vocal lines in the chorus like, "You've missed your chance," which seem unnecessary. There are added instrumentals during the bass solo, and then more ethereal stuff in the middle. I just feel like there's pointlessly too much going on here. In addition, it all feels very filled up with compression, making me feel suffocated. There's also another change to the ending here. They removed the second half of Steve Howe's ending slide guitar solo during the repeating choruses at the end almost completely. Normally, I would say that reducing the amount of Howe in a song would be the only right move to do, but actually, that one on the original platform here sounded really good and wonderfully climactic and epic, and they just cut that? They also shortened this one too by removing 1 full cycle of the chorus at the end. 3 tracks in, but oh my god, so many questionable choices being made already. On the final, "I watch the sky," this time, a B3 organ type voice holds the final chord instead of the mellotron string motif coming in the original. And this fades into the Madman at the Airfield, which opens with like synth koto, oriental sounding string arpeggios echoing for like 3 seconds. And then we get into the mellotron chords and into the song proper. Again, was this necessary at all? Thankfully, they didn't touch up this one too much. Instrumentals still sound great. Horn's voice lacks the power of Benoit's take. The chorus, however, is where things start changing a little bit. The lyrics are different a little bit, more specific about a man rather than someone, and it's not voice calling, but rather the wind calling. I hear the wind. I hear her calling, or something like that. Not sure why they made these changes. And in the instrumental fill after the chorus, it sounds like a synth hi-hat playing 16ths. That's new, I think, and it doesn't sound good. Like, this sounds like this is something that they're listening to in their headphones to keep time when they're recording, and not something that should end up on the final release. They once again skip a beat, literally, like it was a steady measure in the original, but then they decided to make it shorter by removing 1 beat. And I'm thinking whether I would like this album if this was the version that I heard first. The second chorus keeps the original lyrics actually, and the final minutes sections have been rearranged as well a bit, separating the organ solo and vocals, while in the original they kind of happened at the same time. The final, calm vocals that were originally in harmony now feature just Squire's line, so that's a nice touch. I like that. Next, we get into Bumpy Ride, my least favorite track, as you might remember. And at first glance, they didn't do much touching up to this largely instrumental track, except they made the crash cymbals a lot louder. I don't know why, really. I also don't even know if they're the original tracks, or did they just record new crash cymbals and paste them literally on top of the song, or maybe they're just used samples of crashes. I say literally on top because that's what it sounds like. The crash cymbals are so blatantly out of place in the music, there's just no blending going on. It's like they took the original song off the album, pasted it into their DAW, and then made another parallel track with all the crash cymbal strikes on it. I can't help but laugh, honestly, every time I hear those crashes. And that's one of the complaints I had about the original, is that it wasn't funny enough. And on the new version, it finally sounds like a 2-minute long ba-dum-bum-ps, ba-dum-bum-ps, ba-dum-bum-ps. Next, we get into the reprise. Sounds not bad, and now I understand why they butchered the ending of part 1 of We Can Fly. It's because they just moved it over to the ending of the reprise here, and they re-recorded the guitar solo, and it doesn't sound as good. Anyway, that was the Fly From Here suite, which was not sweet. Not a promising start. Next up, The Man You Always Wanted Me to Be. Largely came out unscathed. However, of course, Trevor replaced all of Benoit's parts in the backing vocals, and he sounds so obvious. His parts stand out and don't blend in with the other vocals, and it's quite distracting. This seems to be the running theme for this album, no blending. Really, it's like instead of drinking a screwdriver, you just take a sip of orange juice, and then take a sip of vodka. This is the album. The yeah, yeah at the end performed by horn are kind of funny, not gonna lie. And they redid the guitar solo here as well, I think, making the part longer. Towards the end, the backing vocals originally sang "The man you always wanted me to be" to the same melody of yeah, yeah, yeah. But here, you still hear that and also yeah, yeah on top of it. Come on, one or the other. It would be fine if they were separate melodies, but here they're just exactly the same. Just distracting again. Dear God. Next is Life on a Film Set. Personally, my favorite vocal treatment from Horn here. His vocals feel strained and aged, but kind of suit the mood. The treatment on his vocals is pretty dry here, and maybe it sounds better than the echoey original. He's changed up the melodies in some places, and verse 2 and chorus 2 have completely different lyrics. In the second fast-paced half, Trevor's voice continues to be very dry, and I want that bouncy echo when he's singing, but it's not here anymore, and I miss it. The mix during the guitar solo has been switched around as well. The guitar is a little too strong, and the drums are not showing up as clearly as I would like. And the last, "Riding a Tiger," has a very nice filtered echo effect after they finish singing, so I appreciate that one maybe more than the original as well. Anyway, big change with the next track, Hour of Need, which now has an extended instrumental intro and outro, with toms and drums so compressed it's kind of crackling the track. The intro is almost a minute long. It's a little epic, fast-paced rock band arrangement, and the transition into the original portion of the song with a Spanish ukulele was quite poorly executed. Very obviously sounds like two separate recordings without any nice lead into the next section. But funnily enough, this extra intro and later outro were recorded during the original sessions back in 2011, at the suggestion of Horn to make the song more epic. They didn't end up including it on the final release, though they did release the extended nearly 7-minute long cut on the Japanese-only release of the original Fly From Here album. And I listened to that one, and the transitions between the sections there sound really good. Very natural. And somehow they purposely made it sound fake here. Furthermore, the kick drum during the middle light section is veritably swallowing the rest of the music around it. It's a poor mix, man. So poor. So then, the song as it was originally finishes off after 3.5 minutes without much change. Then the last chord reverses and then begins swelling into the next fresh instrumental outro section, resuming the theme established at the beginning. It doesn't sound as good, especially since in the original Japanese-only extended version, the transition sounded so natural, and then they made it so needlessly accentuated with that reverse fade-in. The instrumental section is alright, and it's not bad actually, though the mix sounds really muffled, especially the drum track. Steve's guitar work is actually really good here, and I like a lot of it. The arrangement as well, the overall arrangement. But I feel it doesn't really blend all that well with the main meat of Hour of Need, but it was perfectly fine when they made it in 2011. Why remix it and embellish it so much here? Anyway, Solitaire remains fairly unchanged as far as I can tell. Are some parts re-recorded? Because I really can't recall. Some parts seem a bit longer than the original, but let's get past it. Next, The biggest change is the next track. No, not Into the Storm, but Don't Take No for an Answer. And this was recorded during the original 2011-2010 sessions, but left on the cutting room floor. It makes its appearance for the first time now. It has a kind of laid-back countryish rock groove with lead vocals from Steve Howe, like an Hour of Need. And it doesn't sound super great, because he's not a great vocalist. Occasionally, Trevor sings in unison, but not throughout the entire track like an Hour of Need. And the lyrics are a little sappy, and don't flow very naturally, especially during the chorus. Don't take no for an answer. The verses are terribly boring and forgetful. The chords in the verses have a sort of late 60s feel, pretty laid back, featuring lots of tricky chord progressions. The progressions themselves are interesting and would be pretty cool, I'd say, if the arrangement wasn't so brain dead and boring. The playing of the chords, the beat especially, sounds uncreative and not in keeping with really the overall adventurous and interesting rhythm play happening on other tracks on the album. Though the chorus has a lot more punch. I love the strong downbeat of the drums, it works great here, but the song needs a lot more going on, or at least executed in a different way during the verses. On top of that, the drums are horribly compressed, again, and almost crackling. Again. So that's a no for me. The solo in this track is actually pretty nice, and follows closely with the melody of the chorus. Then after that solo, we get some instrumental runs that finish the song. The motifs are actually pretty cool, and by the end of it, I like it. It gets really climactic as that repeating theme modulates ever upward, and I wish that the drum fills were more adventurous here and not keeping so close with the rhythm of the melody. The song has some cool ideas that were just not executed in a great way, I feel. I'd rather have this one remain on the cutting room floor. Finally, we get into the Storm. The structure is identical, but of course the vocals are different. Most of the song is sung in harmony as before, but now the balance of the harmonies is kind of thrown off, because what I felt was the melody, with the surrounding voices being the backing harmonies in the original release, is mixed differently now, so that the Squire or Steve lead vocals are now backing vocals, with Benoit's harmony line, or rather Trevor's part now, being the loudest, as if that's the melody you're supposed to be singing along to. So that threw me off. The Armies of Angels section, however, sounds great, and Trevor performed that really well, and was mixed really well. So not much different apart from that, so this may be my favorite retake on the album. Still not better than the original. None of these tracks are better than the originals. It's impressive. It honestly is, that there were so many things changed in this album, and over 90% of the changes were negative. Yes, have really been itching and capitalizing on the drama lineup, it seems. Like the drama album developed a devout following over the years, and was an elusive classic since Anderson refused to play any songs off it during his tenure. But the magic is wearing thin now. The original 2011 Fly From Here sounded like Yes. This 2018 edition sounds like Trevor Horn, Trevor Horn, Trevor Horn, Trevor Horn. I think both Howe and Horn really like themselves a lot, and can't help but boost themselves up in the music at every opportunity. Maybe Trevor wanted to live up to his namesake and stick out like a horn. The execution, despite it being an interesting idea and concept, was very poorly executed. In a very amateurish way, it might seem. You know, when they first released it, I figured it would be like a fun optional supplement recording, kind of like a bonus album, if you will. But that's not the case, because when you go into the band's official YouTube page and look up Fly From Here, what do you get? The Trevor Horn version, only. Maybe you want to buy it digitally. The original album is out of print, so I gotta go to Apple Music, right? You can't find it there, it's just all return trip. Fine, I'll just go stream it on Spotify. Can't. It's all Trevor Horn's return trip. So the band effectively have done their best to delete Benoit David's history with the band. Maybe there's something I've missed. Maybe behind the scenes, he was fucking everyone's wife. I mean, that's a pretty crass comment to make, and I'm sorry, Benoit, if you're watching this, but that's the only reason I'd be willing to accept for how the band has treated him. It's absolutely disgraceful, and they just threw him under the bus like that. I just don't understand what's happening. So I'm gonna give Fly From Here, Return Trip, a desecration out of 10. So let's try to get past this and travel back in time a bit and rejoin the new lineup of Yes. Set to work on a new album with John Davison on lead vocals, who has had songwriting experience with his time in Glass Hammer, so maybe he could bring some new ideas in and revitalize the band. We'll just have to wait and see, won't we? So join me next time when I'll be reviewing their most recent album, 2014's Heaven and Earth. So please like and subscribe for more Yes review and more original music coming your way on this YouTube channel. And special thanks to my patrons, and if you're interested in contributing, there's links to my Patreon in the description below. And also you can check out my music on Bandcamp as well. So everyone, please stay safe. Thanks again for your support. I'll see you around. Let's start recording. This is recording. Bam, bam, bam. It's a bit too loud. Okay, let's go, man. It's been a while. Let's go.